Beautiful. Welcome back to another episode of Baltimore Real Estate Full Circle. We're really happy to have you on the podcast. For those who don't know who this is Izzy Patoka. Please introduce yourself. Obviously I could say words, but I believe, you could give yourself a really great introduction. So tell us, who are you?
And what do you do? So I'm Izzy Patoka, and I'm councilman for the beautiful second district of Baltimore County. I'm in my second term, 2 years into the second term. So I've been a council member for 6 years now.
Wow. Wow. So I guess it's 4 years per term.
Yes.
Wow. So what, we're jumping right into where you're holding now. What got you into, I would say, politics, that dirty word. But where did you start from?
So I never thought I would be here, Yankee. I went to graduate school for environmental planning. So I have a bachelor's degree in environmental planning and a master's degree in environmental planning. I wanted to be a planner, an urban planner. So after I graduated, I got a job in Baltimore City planning, and I worked there for 17 years.
Wow.
And I ended up being chief of capital budgeting for the city. Uh, then Baltimore County called me and said, "Hey, would you like to be chief of capital budgeting for Baltimore County?" And so I accepted that job, became deputy director of planning 8 months into the job, and was really enjoying being a planner for Baltimore County. Um, got invited to go back to the city to be in the mayor's office to create this brand new agency called the Mayor's Office of Neighborhoods. I did that for Martin O'Malley called me to do that. Then he became governor. He asked me to join him in the governor's office. So I didn't realize that I would be 14 years in with the mayor and governor of the state, Martin O'Malley, and then left the governor's office, was director of community development for LifeBridge Health for 5 years. And then I thought, I've been doing this kind of work my whole life. I've been community centered. I'm going to try to take a run for myself as council member. And I was the underdog. We won by 18 points.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was a good run the first time.
What that must have been, meaning until the last day, were you under the impression that the opponent, I should say, was going to win?
I did not know. I did not know. I was hopeful that we would, but there was one poll that was done by the Maryland home builders. So we did a less than scientific poll that was favorable, but polls you just don't know. But the Maryland home builders did a poll of that race, and it showed me with a 2-to-1 margin, and that was late into the race.
Wow.
But there was a large number of undecideds, and so you don't really know. But we were hopeful because on any poll, whether it's a good poll or a bad poll, you always want to be on the right side, on the winning side of that poll.
Correct.
So I didn't know, but then as we started to look in the campaign world, what you do is you go to each polling place at 8 o'clock when the polls close, and you can see the numbers. And I'll tell you, in this district, some of the high volume polling places are Summit Park Elementary, Fort Garrison Elementary. And when we pulled those numbers and they were so one-sided towards our campaign, we knew it was over at that point.
That's great. What did they miss? I mean, it's amazing that, you got such a amazing victory, but what were they missing?
So I believe in the campaign world that field wins. Field means that you're going to greet a voter, not in at an event, you're going to their house. So in that race, my first race, I knocked 11,000 doors.
Wow.
If you meet someone on their porch, they're very likely to vote for you. If you can't, if you meet them on the porch and they're not likely to vote for you, then you're probably in the wrong business because you don't have something that connects. Think about it. How many elected officials have knocked on your door and say, "Hey, I'm running for office. What are issues that are important to you? And how can we work on them together?"
For me, 0.
Yeah, but if you didn't know any of the candidates and one did, wouldn't you say, "Wow, that, that candidate came to my house."
Right, and to your point, if you come into someone's house and they're still not voting for you, whatever you're doing in the campaign is not gonna make a difference,
Yes, you
you
get a
know?
bad message.
Yeah, yeah, it won't make a difference at that point. Wow. So now you've been 6 years in. Have you seen a change in the work that you're doing since you started?
Yes, I think that one my team focuses on constituent services. Let me back up and say, here's what a council member does. You're an elected official, but there's really five basic functions of a council member. One is you're a legislative body, meaning you make laws, you tweak laws, you change laws, like any legislative body. Secondly, you approve the budget. That's a core function. Third, you um, you review contracts. In the city of Baltimore, it's the Board of Estimates. In the state of Maryland, it's the Board of Public Works. Baltimore County doesn't have an equivalent body, so the county council is the entity that the governing body that reviews contracts. Um, we have broad land use authority. That's number four. And last but not least is we do constituent services. And my team, we do constituent services on steroids. Like we're relentless in follow up. So if you call in and say, I have a pothole, um, if you called in, let's say Saturday night at 11 o'clock, it's very likely that you'll get a response at 11:15 on a Saturday night that says, hey, thank you for sending this in. We've already forwarded it to the Department of Public Works, and you'll see that, and we'll be able to track it.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's funny because I live in the city right now. And I remember the city came by to fix, I think there was a main sewer line or something, they fixed it, but the parking right in front of my house, they just never fixed the gravel there, and they never fixed the cement, so, like, I had to call them probably, like, 4 times for them to come back out and actually, like, fix it.
So we do that for you because Justin Silberman, our chief of staff, he's a pit bull and he's relentless. So the agencies know that if Justin calls you once or emails you once, you better take care of it because he will not stop. So many of the agencies say, well, let's just deal with Justin once rather than have to do it multiple times. And so we've been really successful at getting constituent services done.
Wow, and you mentioned budget, and I wanted to talk about that a little bit because I think that's a hot topic today,
Yeah.
looking at the Maryland budget and the Baltimore City's budget. I haven't heard a lot about Baltimore County's budget, which I'm gonna assume is a good thing because when you hear about budgets, usually it's a negative thing.
Well, the good news, let's talk about the good news and then we'll talk about the stressful news. So we have a AAA bond rating. It looks like we're going to keep that. Very few counties, I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of less than 5% had that AAA bond rating, meaning we are able to access money at a lower rate. And so that's the good news. The challenging news and not so good news is that we have a really tight budget for fiscal 26. Fiscal 26 starts July 1 of 2025. Really, really tight. One, because the state budget is tight, so we get a lot of state money. The federal government, there's some unknown variables that are occurring because different agencies are not doing or doing things differently. So we don't know exactly how that's going to play out. But fiscal 27, July 1 of 2026 is gonna be really challenging. I heard it's gonna be much worse than, fiscal, um, 20 26. 27 will be more challenging than 26. But there are applications that you can use in defining a budget. You know, like I said earlier, I was chief of capital budgeting for the city, chief of capital budgeting for the county, and Yankee, the first thing I would do during a budget year is we'd get our revenue estimates for the next year from the budget office, and they'd say, "You have, you know, that's I'm making this number up, but $3 billion for the next budget year. How are you gonna look at that? Maybe you have $3 billion in revenue projections, but you have $3.5 billion in need." So first thing I would do is I would go through every outstanding project account by account, and I would look for money funding that was either not spent, project might be completed, but there was funding left in the project account, or project accounts that were allocated, but the project never got going. And so it's like looking for change in your couch, right? You start to then you do an official action of deappropriation. and you deappropriate that, and you'd be surprised at how much funding you can get through this exercise of looking at every capital account, deappropriating any unspent dollars. And every once in a while, you find a project where an agency just hasn't really been on the ball with it. And so once you say, hey, we're going to deappropriate those funds, all of a sudden it re energizes the project.
That's it, because then they know they're losing money now. Because like, "Wait a second, you guys have been sitting with this development for how long now, and we're giving you money, but nothing's going on, so."
So we're going to pull it back and repurpose that money for a park or for a school or for street resurfacing.
Right. Wow. So I think that's a job that I can imagine no one wants to do, but it has to get done.
It's a, I mean, I think it's a rewarding job, but it has its moments sometimes.
Because like, on all ends of it, because 'cause you're essentially having tough conversations with anyone that you're saying, "Hey, this is a surplus, which you don't need,"
Yes.
you know? So that must be interesting.
Yeah. Well, but the rewarding part is you do get to, this is going back to chief of capital budgeting, you do get to, you gain experience. So for me, going into the next 2 years, having this experience as being developing a budget, being the first author of a budget, I think during really challenging times, I think it'll allow me. It's given me the experience and the acumen to be able to try to navigate through a really difficult budget scenario.
It's a very good question. I mean, now that you're bringing it up when it comes to struggles with budgets, obviously, I think a hot topic for landlords and for really just homeowners and a regular day-to-day person is, like you mentioned, if the budget's getting tighter and you look at the city, and I believe the city's running at a deficit, what does that mean for, first of all, for the county or the city in your experience when there's a deficit? Where they're pulling the extra money from? And then second of all, how would that affect your day-to-day person on all ends of the spectrum if the budget's getting tighter because of both, local and federal changes that are happening?
Well, there's a couple of ways to address a really challenging budget. When I worked in the governor's office, we had to do some really unfortunate things. This was during the Great Recession of 2008, where we allocated a budget for the year, and during the course of the year, we realized that if we continued at the rate we were going, we weren't going to balance the budget by year's end. So what we had to do is we had to do mid-year cuts, and mid-year cuts are really, really difficult thing to do because there's an anticipation. So, for example, Yankee, if your street was planned to be resurfaced, and then um, it's in the books, but we don't have enough money during the course of the year for projecting out how our expenditures are going, then all of a sudden we say, Yankee, we're going to do a mid-year cut, and your street's no longer in the books, even though it'd been penciled in. That actually happened on Reisterstown Road, and Reisterstown Road in Pikesville is state highway. So it's not county funds, it's state highway. But
Really, it's considered a state highway?
yeah, all of the streets, Reisterstown, that emanate from the center of the city to out here and this heading to a new place like Reisterstown Road was headed towards Reisterstown.
This
Uh,
Park
House
House.
Heights is a little different, um, but York Road was headed towards York, Pennsylvania.
Oh, wow.
Frederick Road was headed towards Frederick, Maryland.
Interesting.
Because all of those radial
Holland's Ferry also?
pardon?
Holland's Ferry down in.
I'm not sure about Holland's Ferry. I think that might be a local road, but I'm not 100% sure. Uh, but most of the ones, because Holland's Ferry, I don't think starts in the center of the city, but the others do.
Right.
And Harford Road,
Yeah.
headed to Harford. Bel Air Road,
Head of Bel Air.
to Bel Air.
Yeah.
And so those are all state roads. And it's an interesting thing because in Baltimore City, the state roads are managed by the city. In Baltimore County, the state roads are managed by the state. And it's an old agreement that's still in place. So, for example, if it snows, the city will plow all the streets in the city. In Baltimore County, we will.
Your iPhone's trying to figure out how that works.
So in Balt, in
It's always listening.
yeah, that's scary. In Baltimore County, the county will plow the county roads, but the state will plow the state roads. Now, having said that, the city gets a larger allocation of state funds to be able to plow all those roads.
Right.
So we had a mid-year cut. Um, that's a terrible way to do it. In Baltimore County, we at year's end we have something called a budget appropriation transfer at the end of the year, and it's a movement of money from one agency that has extra money and one agency that doesn't. One of the things we do in Baltimore County that's not a great way to do things, and I've shared that publicly, is we always overfund the police department and underfund fire and corrections.
Why is that? Do they feel like there's more of a need in comparison?
I can't really make sense of it, but I do protest it every year when the agencies come in because to me, to be transparent, let's fund the police. We know so the way we do a budget is we look at the historic expenditure rate, and if the police in the last 2 or 3 years have spent X amount of dollars, then you put X in, and but we're putting Y in because we want to for some reason, we underfund fire, we underfund corrections. In the years I've been a council member, is we do this budget appropriation transfer at the end of the year, and make correct the budget with corrections and fire. It's not a great way to budget. I've shared that with the budget director. He and I just have a fundamental disagreement.
Difference? Is he nerve I know a city's crime is down. Is the county crime down also? I'm like, is that connected maybe?
I think our violent crimes are down. Chief McCullough is a terrific police chief, and I have a great deal of confidence in him. The rank and file have a great deal of confidence in him, and I think that's really important because if you have if in any uh, area of work, if you have confidence in the boss, it makes everyone work harder. I think.
Yeah, no, for sure. If you feel like the boss is out for lunch, then you're like, "What am I been doing
It's
this
like,
for?"
well, yeah, why am I doing this? The boss isn't really doing pulling his weight.
Wow.
Weight.
So, on the topic, like you were saying, so now, if let's say you come mid-year, there's not enough, what do you guys prioritize when it comes to funding?
That's a great question. So I guess public safety and education are probably priorities. Um, I think the things that get kicked back are probably like the street resurfacing because you, public safety can be a life or death situation if you don't have enough resources out there. Um, education, children have to go to school, right? Uh, although in our community, not everybody's using the public schools.
Oh my, it's so funny to me. Literally, you brought it up.
Yeah.
I was talking to someone like, "Yeah, we're saving for our kids' college funds." And in my head, I'm like, because we send to private schools, because I'm Orthodox, or even a lot of non-Orthodox send to private schools, it's like you end up saving for every year because it may be 1 year's not expensive as a university, but you're talking about over 12 years. That's, it's a
Yeah.
lot of money.
It's a tough situation, and, the interesting thing with the Orthodox community, if, let's say, one day the Orthodox community said, "Hey, we're not gonna go to the Jewish schools, we're gonna go to public school," we wouldn't have the seats to take on, I don't know, 10, 12, 15,000 new students.
Wow. It'd be a crisis.
It would be a crisis. It would be. So, I think there's a the community underestimates the value to the budget, right, if you will, by you sending your children to private school, uh, you're actually contributing to our ability to balance the budget.
It's interesting how the local economy runs in sync without necessarily realizing it.
Yes.
Wow. So that's very interesting mentioning that the priority really is when these things come due is going to be the safety and essentially the move.
Safety, education, um, corrections. You can't have you can't understaff your corrections agency. Fire, you don't wanna have a tragedy because you didn't have enough resources.
Right.
These are parks might be pushed back, road resurfacing might be pushed back,
Funding developments.
funding developments might be pushed incentives. So let's say there's an incentive for development, although sometimes that can be higher priority because in the long run, there's gonna be,
More housing.
more your revenues, right? You bring in more revenues to the jurisdiction, and so sometimes it's difficult to pull back on that.
Right. It's actually now that you're mentioning the developments, I recently had a meeting with a developer, and I was trying to understand. I'd love to hear your opinion on it. Like, you look at the city, it seems like downtown by the water, everyone's developing. Like every down here, another development that's going on. In the county, less so. And it just for me, it's intriguing. Like, what's your opinion on specifically housing developments in the county?
Sure.
And I know there's some developments that had some controversy. We didn't have to get into the specifics, but I would say in more of a overall standpoint when it comes to the mix of more, having more housing supply, but also balancing it with what the local communities want.
Sure. So here's what I think we need to do in Baltimore County in terms of housing development. I think there's two real pathways to this. One pathway is to go vertical. And so I had in the last we rezone properties once every 4 years. And so we just finished up the comprehensive rezoning map process, which is that quadrennial zoning process. And I rezoned 2 properties in Pikesville, for vertical zoning. It's called RAE, which is residential apartment elevator, and you can go up to 5 stories, and, so it depends how large your footprint is. So if you have a larger footprint, you can have more units, limiting it to 5 stories. If you have a smaller footprint, then there's lesser units. So I think vertical zoning is kind of the wave of the future. And then secondarily, last year I introduced and was able to pass. And the reason I say introduced and able to pass in Baltimore County Council, you can have a great idea, but if you can't get 4 votes for that idea, it's just an idea. So you have to work hard to get the votes. And so I was able to muster 4 or 5 votes out of 7 members for what's called a um, it's called a overlay district.
Is that overlay? It might be reminding me of something. It's not the 1-to-1 ratio. You're referring to that?
No, it's an overlay district. It's for um having vertical zoning with putting commercial, so you can have commercial and residential. So um you can have commercial on the first level, residential on the upper level. So we created that overlay district. Um And then the other thing that I think is great opportunity is the reuse of, and this is where the overlay district is applicable, is for, let's say, older shopping centers that were really viable in the 70s and 80s, and I'm going back to the 1900s, the 1970, 1980, and maybe 1990. These shopping centers were viable, and now less so because we didn't, shopping behavior has changed. We shop on Amazon. In fact, office behavior has changed because people need less office space um, post pandemic. And so our zoning codes, the basic framework of our zoning codes are based on retail behaving in a certain way, an office behaving in a certain way, and even residential behaving in a certain way because now many people are working from home. So they have a home office.
Right.
And so all these things that,
Losing revenue.
yeah, our framework of the zoning code is based on something that was in the 1900 in the 20th century. We need a 21st century zoning code. So really, we need to overhaul the zoning code, but that takes a huge political lift and political fortitude. So absent of that, we can work on, like, how do we repurpose these older shopping centers so that we can have many of them are on transit lines.
Right. I think the one in White Marsh, I saw that the news press release about that one. Are you involved in that one at all?
I was not directly involved in that, uh, but I think indirectly we'll be involved in all of them because it really it's all of us that have to dig in and get 4 votes on any of these kinds of
Projects.
on these projects, right? And but I think there's real opportunity for repurposing older shopping centers and having maybe some commercial, some office if that plays out, and then having residential related to it. But the reason the zoning code has to change is because zoning code has parking requirements, and so if you all of a sudden have commercial and residential, how do you address the parking needs? Because it's a different metric, I think.
Right, you have to build a garage, essentially, you have to build that because in some cases, there's not enough space.
Yeah, if you let's say you have a family with 2 cars, and then you have also people coming in to shop, then you're having 3 or 4 cars per house, per unit. So I think we need to figure that out and then make it work,
Right,
because I think that's the opportunity. So the 2 opportunities I see are, um, vertical zoning and repurposing older shopping centers.
right, and you think I mean, the good point about this and really talking about this is that developers that may be listening know, "Okay, this is what the county is looking to do, so if we wanna get something passed, we should work within that, like, that space," you know?
And I think the county is willing, at least I am, to be good partners with the development community on repurposing, and going vertical. Like I said, in the last zoning, cycle, and it ended last September, um, there's 2 on Park Heights that we approved at Park Heights and Slade.
Oh, that was no, that's not Howard Brown's that's I think the
No,
Howard is still in a city, no?
city.
'Cause it's, like it's weird how the line goes.
Yes, it
Yeah,
goes through. So I go to Baltimore Hebrew
right.
congregation, that's my shul, and so I always say, we park in the county and daven in the city.
It's so true out of line, and then you go to Pickwick, which is all the way back to your mine at Pickwick, right? Wright Burger's building.
Yeah,
That's all the way county line, but then you go that way,
yeah.
and it's city. It's so strange.
So if you think about Falstaff and Reisterstown Road,
Right.
the county line is county city line is diagonal from Falstaff and Reisterstown to Park Heights and Slade.
That's so strange.
And then Willow Glen is the northern boundary.
That's so
And in
interesting.
fact, Gitzi Schleifer and I work on projects on Willow Glen, because one side of Willow Glen is the county, the other side is the city. There was a pedestrian bridge over Western Run, which Yitzi uh, connected the bridge on the city side, but the county side was not connected. So we partnered up. And so people, if you're an older person, or if you if you're um, have a stroller, you you have to go around the block. So once Yitzi and I partnered up, and I'm sorry, Councilman Schleifer and I partnered up, uh, we connected the bridge. So now um, someone with a stroller can go to shul and cross, or go wherever they want to go, to a friend's house or whatever, and they can cross the bridge over Western Run on Willow Glen without having to go around the block.
Wow, it's funny how, like, local
Well, Councilman Schleifer and I, like in many cases, elected officials can be in competition with one another, and Yitzi and I are partners with one another because we recognize that the our community is not really the city line is more of an artificial. It's not natural. It's an unnatural boundary.
even like you just said, it's really unnatural.
Yes.
The way it works is just very unnatural.
Yeah, and and also the way the community behaves,
Right.
because you may live in the city, go to shul in the county. You may live in the county, go to shul in the city,
And go shopping
go
or
shopping at 7 Mile, which is in the county, just in the county.
yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's so strange because then all the way up is Slade from 7 Mile.
So it's diagonal.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, so, and then the Arab, that's kind of the community, right? And so much of it is in my district, much of half of it, I would say half and half in Yitzi's district and my district. But, for me as a Jewish council member, I have to really be cognizant and share some of the things that are important to our community here. For example, the Arab, my colleagues don't know what that is.
Were you involved in extending it? Because I know extended, I think, a year ago to the Green Gate area of the
N-
counties.
No, I can do zoning, but the Arab is above my pay grade. That is a rabbi's decision. That's string, yes. I will say, though, that when I first got into office at Old Court and, where Old Court and Park Heights meet,
On the block.
yeah, and I think Sudbrook and Stevenson. So I was just elected, and there was a storm, the line came down, and it was like a Thursday, I think. And so I got a call on this, and I think it was from Bert Miller, who is kind of the administrator of the Arif. And he said, Izzy, the line came down. It has to get up by Arif Shabbos. And so I said, okay, no problem. I called the county folks and said, can you get this line up or give it the authority? Because they have their own, the Arif crew has their own bucket
Okay.
trucks. Yeah. And folks had addressed that. And I thought it'd be no problem, but then that area is state highway. So I had to then engage the state. And I will say the district engineer from the state was very cooperative. And so my first political victory was to get the Arab line back up on a state highway. Look at that. Yeah.
For the jobs, for jobs, and all in time for someone to go carry.
So you never know what's going to happen from day to day. And that's kind of the enjoyable part of the job.
Wow, that definitely seems, and especially in Baltimore, things always are changing. Um, a couple other things really focusing on development wise. What are some changes? I know Howard County, I remember I was reading an article. They were trying to slow down on developments, I think, because overcrowding of schools in Howard County. How is that when it comes specifically to Baltimore County? Is that something people are concerned about with developments? Is it transportation? People are nervous about traffic when it comes to like local communities against new developments.
Well, you're always gonna have that resistance, but I think, I always thought if you lay down a layer of community relations, it makes community development a little bit easier. But in Baltimore County, we have what's called the urban-rural demarcation line, and it's 90% of the people live inside the, urban-rural demarcation line. It's also called the URDL, which is the acronym, and 10% live outside. So the URDL basically follows the plumbing. And by plumbing, I mean sewer lines, sewer and water go out to a certain part of the county. And so you can connect up if you have a new housing development to, and the way the URDL is shaped right now, it it's every neighborhood around the Beltway, inside and outside the Beltway, um, it's like three fingers. It pops up around Owings Mills. Then in the center of the county, it pops up around, Hunt Valley, and then in the east side around White Marsh. So it's like 3 fingers, and that's where the water and sewer you can connect up to water and sewer. Outside of that is really low density, um, it's where our watersheds are, so the one of the things you don't wanna really have high density development is you don't wanna contaminate the watersheds. Once you do that, there's no there's no coming back to that, the water right now, it's getting a little salinated with salt from just traveling through. It's manageable, but you don't wanna really go too far. We had a bill last night that passed to kind of protect that urban-rural demarcation, but if you think about it, if you ever drive straight up 83, you can tell when you're in Baltimore County because you have the nice wooded area, and you know when you've hit Pennsylvania because all of that stops. But it's really, so I think we need to, the opportunities for development are inside the URDL for high density development, and it goes back to what I said about shopping centers and vertical zoning. You still can develop outside of the URDL, but instead of water and sewer, you have to do, well and septic,
Right.
which is a little bit more challenging, because you need areas that perk. If they don't perk, you can't build there, and you can only build certain amount of units on well and septic.
Right. Right. That's so interesting. It's something that you wouldn't think about necessarily as a developer until you realize, wait a second, the sewer lines. And if it's too it's not big enough, it's not gonna be able to handle it, and like you said, then it contaminates.
And it's different, like, so, for example, sewage load from a commercial development is less than sewage load from high-density residential,
Right.
because on high-density residential, let's say in the mornings, sewage load from commercial is kind of during the workday, maybe kind of consistent, but then it kind of at night, there's basically nothing.
Right.
But sewage load from residential, you're likely to have high volumes of sewage in the morning because people are waking up, brushing their teeth, taking a shower, going to the bathroom. Then during the day, it might teeter off. And then at night, it might peak back up. But I think morning, in fact, interesting thing in Ocean City, Maryland, you know how they define how many people have visited Ocean City on a given weekend?
No.
By the amount of sewage they treat. Because they have calculated that one person will be equivalent to certain gallons of sewage.
Right.
And so if they have, 100,000 gallons of sewage on a weekend, they can they divide it by that that metric.
Number.
Yeah, and they figure out how many people have visited.
Well, that's a creative idea.
Yeah. I mean, it works.
Wow. For how many people are vacationing in Ocean City? I mean, they're gonna have numbers coming up soon in the next few months.
Yeah, they will, for sure. But, the water and sewer is really important because, um, you know, think about it, if you don't well and septic can be a little bit unpredictable.
Right, right. No, it's you have to it's basically you're gonna have to build that out essentially as a developer versus using whatever is in place in the county's resources.
And some institutions have their own wastewater treatment plant, like Stevenson University, because you have lots of people there.
Right.
They have a mini wastewater treatment plant,
That must be a very big.
but that's more for institutional
Right,
type.
right. That's very interesting. Are you seeing more investors looking into Baltimore County specifically now that some of the other counties have been a lot harder on specific rental laws? I mean, I don't have to get into specifics,
Yeah.
but I'm intrigued to see if people now are taking another look at Baltimore County and trying to work with the county to really buy assets, large assets there, develop there because they're feeling less confident maybe about PG and Montgomery.
I think so, but I think part of it relates to like where can you get a guaranteed rate of return on your investment? And right now it's a little unpredictable. So, and it looks like in the future it's going to be more unpredictable. I was talking to one very successful developer in Baltimore County who's saying he was having a bit of a rough time, and I said, "Why are you having a rough time?" He said, "Because with supply chain, with
Tariffs.
tariffs, costs." He said, "People that might be investors in a project that I'm doing are not feeling that they can." They're almost willing to put their money um, in bonds because they can guaranteed because I can't really get them right now an 8 or 9 or 10% return. I never even thought of it that way. But and I don't want to say who this is, but I'm sure you know him, and and he's been very successful in this area and actually regionally as well.
Wow. So that's very interesting to hear. Meaning even though technically Baltimore County, based on what's going on locally, should be doing better in that regard, but because of the global economic stance and yeah, it's I think, Social Security office is gonna lose 7,000 jobs, so that's gonna be
Yeah, so that's a really good point, Yankee. So, guy I know, he owns Monahan's restaurant. Monahan's is near Social Security in Woodlawn. Um, he was telling me for years since the pandemic, his business is his lunch business is 30% of what it was when pre-pandemic. But
because no people not going to office.
yeah, people working remotely and didn't come back. Then Martin O'Malley became Social Security administrator, and he was bringing people back to work, and so it was picking up. But now, if you have, thousands of people laid off, there's the direct economic impact, meaning um, that person had income, that person was paying their rent or paying their mortgage. That person was buying their going to the grocery store and spending, um, for what they wanted. Now that person that doesn't have a job is spending on what they need, not what they want.
Right.
And so that's a different
Sure.
way to go to the grocery store. And then there's the indirect economic impact, like person might have gone shopping to a shoe store or to because shoes are hard to buy online, I think. I think you have to
Yeah.
go to a store.
Yeah, especially feet. I mean, I'm not gonna get into but my feet are a very specific size, and I
Yeah.
have to go to the store.
Yeah, you want to be comfortable.
Yeah.
And so, or might get a pizza, or instead of going out to a pizza parlor, they're not going to buy a frozen pizza. And so the there's the direct impact, but then the pizza parlor, they don't have the business that they used to have. So all of a sudden they're spending less. So that's the indirect economic impact. And it can grow exponentially as, turning in the economy upside down.
What is and this is something I'm always thinking about because I talk to owners that I work with, and I'm trying to figure out what are people gonna do. Like, I mean, I guess really on the county level, I don't know what there is to do about the jobs that at this point it's really unsure because of the back and forth with the courts. But let's say jobs are lost, which to some degree they will be. Is there anything that someone could do? Like, is there other industries that they're trying to bring back or other places for people to try? Or do you think people are gonna start moving out of state? Like, what do you see
Oh,
coming?
I think Baltimore County needs to double down on manufacturing. Manufacturing can be the heart and soul of growth. And so, and by double down, I mean bring manufacturers here, um, and provide incentives that you can't resist for manufacturing to come here. I was talking to the head of Maryland manufacturing, just yesterday, and he was saying, he had proposed to the city at one time, different mayor, and it was a really interesting idea to like create an incentive, like 5 years of no taxes for a manufacturer to come to and he's saying, "Now you should think about it, Izzy, for Baltimore County." And I'm thinking about it hard. Um,
That's genius. I mean, I think, meaning going slightly off in the same topic with what happened recently with the 3% tax that they were considering.
yes.
I read an article that one of the larger, I think developers or contracting companies basically told the governor, if you're doing that, I'm moving to Virginia.
Yeah, I mean, and so all of a sudden, this company's coming in and they'll, manufacture. We all need product. And so whatever that product is, we have a manufacturer, really cool manufacturer in Timonium. Um, it's they're called Saft. They make batteries.
Interesting.
And so Saft, I went to tour the plant and they just bring in copper and other kind of there were sheets of copper that are being um, coiled, and they look almost like a stick of dynamite, but it's the battery core, and they put multiple cores together, and what they do is they make batteries for spacecraft
Oh, wow.
right here in Baltimore County. And so it was really incredible to see that plant at work. And they were boasting that they had batteries on 4 different terrestrial surfaces.
Say batteries on Mars.
Yeah. Batteries on Mars, on an asteroid, on the moon, and on Earth.
Oh, wow.
And they also have batteries. They said they've done like 7 billion rotations around the Earth with their batteries.
Wow. We're in competition with Elon.
Well, they're an international company. They're out of France. They're looking for to move to having a new national headquarters in North America. And that could be Baltimore County if we work at it.
There you go. See, that's literally one example that would bring jobs. That's interesting. I think that's something that people aren't hearing, and I think it's very helpful for people to hear this, that you are focused on bringing manufacturers that you could bring jobs.
And so Baltimore County has an agency called the Department of Economic and Workforce Development. And they haven't done a great job. They have a new director, Jonathan Sachs, is really good. But prior to Jonathan coming on, it's kind of a failed agency. And the reason I say that is in economic development, to me, there's 3 pillars of economic development. One is uh, business retention. keeping the businesses that you have, keep them here. Like SAF batteries, we want to make sure they stay here. Um, then there's business attraction. Let's bring new businesses to Baltimore County. And then the third pillar is workforce development, training your workforce so that these companies do have someone that can work in their plants or work in their shops. So Baltimore County really focused on workforce development, and we did it really well, but we did not focus at all on business retention and
And
business
expanding.
attraction.
Right.
Think about the Pikesville commercial corridor. Like, it could be much stronger. We
Yeah.
need to focus on making sure that the businesses that are there stay, and then for all the shops that are empty or look like they're becoming empty, let's make sure we have new, exciting businesses come there. Let's work on that.
Right.
And I think that's kind of, to me, a comprehensive economic development. Um, m- uh, I think that's how you would be strong in economic development.
Right. Because really everything is just cogs in a wheel. If you take out jobs, then the wheel just falls and like it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. So what took you from being a council member to now considering to run? What I mean, I know you've been doing this now for 6 years, so it's quite a bit of time now.
Well, one of the things that has made me think about running for county executive, and I'm still in the process of figuring that out, is that Yankee, there's not a day that it goes by where I don't get a call, a text, or someone Facebook messaging me, emailing me, and saying, "Izzy, you have to run for county executive." And so it's really encouraging to me. It's meaningful to me. And so I'm going to continue to talk with my wife and make sure she has some level of comfort with that, and we'll see where it goes.
Wow. What are main things that you're focused on now, and then maybe how that might spill over things that you're targeting to say this needs to be better?
Well, one of the things that's really important to me now and in the future, no matter where the future takes me, is inner beltway neighborhoods. I think we haven't really focused on how we treat inner beltway neighborhoods. Like interesting in our district, this is really interesting because in the city side in Yitzi's district and in my district, we don't have a single rec center.
Really?
Yeah, so um, to me, that's just odd that we don't have a single rec center. And we have a lot of kids
Right.
in this area, and we have to, scramble. I actually coach basketball, 15, 17-year-olds at Pikesville Rec, and I'm going a little off topic, but I do want to mention it because so this past year, I know it's not about winning and losing. It's about like learning how to be a good player. But I will say that we did win the championship this year. It was exciting. So, uh, but getting back to your question is focusing on these inner beltway neighborhoods so we have open space, so that our streets are resurfaced, so that our commercial areas are doing well, so our housing stock is well, so that it's vibrant. Interesting. So the Orthodox community has a real interesting, um, to me, I think it really exudes vitality because if you see on any holiday any, uh, or in Shabbos, you see families walking together. To me, that says there's vitality here. And if we could replicate that across the county where people are comfortable walking, families are walking. Now, here it might be on holidays or Shabbos you're going, sure, but also like in commercial areas, that sense of vibrancy and vitality. And I think we don't have it in a lot of our older commercial corridors. And walkability, I know that our folks have been doing, we were uh, creating walkable communities long before it was fashionable. But, to have that all across the county, especially in um, our older inner beltway communities. I think we could do a lot better there.
Right. No, I see that. I mean, even look at where MCB's office is, that whole area. I
Mm.
mean, that's a pretty part of the city, but still, that whole area, you could see it's like just a bunch of random commercial.
Yeah.
But then I don't think they developed it, but the developer made that into like it's a very different feel when you go to that development
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you drive by and you see there's like a gym there, there's a law office, there's MCB, there's a few other offices there.
Yeah. And we need to build out on that, I think.
Yeah, 100%. So that's that's definitely some good stuff when it comes to developing the county. What are things you do for fun? Aside from
Well, I don't have time for much time for hobbies, but like coaching basketball is something I really love. I used to play a lot, but my body is telling me that I'm not a good player anymore. Uh, but and one of the things that I really like about coaching is that it's therapy for me because I'm not thinking about a pothole. I'm not thinking about a street resurfacing or trash not getting picked up. I'm thinking about who's going to grab that loose ball. How aggressive are we playing? Why aren't we getting offensive rebounds? And we better work harder at that. And also, there's reward in seeing my players grow. They're 15 and set to 17, so nice to see them grow. Um, I enjoy so my son is in college right now, and he's in Montreal, and my son Rory is a terrific baseball player. He got recruited to play baseball at Concordia University in
wow.
Montreal, and so really enjoy hanging out with him when he comes home. And I used to get up there to watch a few games. It was really exciting and really fun. College baseball is a whole different level.
Yeah. Now it might be harder to go to Canada, Andre.
Mike G, they're not really happy with us right now.
No, I went to a country recently where they're tariffing very much, and I could feel like I've been there before, but like I could be wrong, but I sense like negativity towards like America and like.
Well, when the Orioles played the Blue Jays in Toronto, they booed the national anthem, which is it's really sad.
Yeah, it's kinda crazy. Cause I was in school in Toronto for a little bit,
Yeah.
so I know, that area well. I mean, the whole energy thing in Ontario was a whole scandal for a little bit. But final few questions for you. I mean, I was actually thinking back to what you were saying earlier about reuse of vacant spaces. I could be wrong, but it seemed to me that a lot of the office buildings in Towson started going vacant, and, I mean, it seems that revenue is going down for those buildings. Similar to what we're seeing, I guess, downtown of the city, do you know if and what plans are there for those buildings? Are they just letting them just sit and
Well, I think
sell?
in the future there may be some movement to uh, repurpose some of the office space into residential. The real issue with that is parking. How do you to figure out parking?
Yeah, it's very limited there.
Yeah, so how do you let's say, um, especially in Towson, they got lots of office buildings, so if you did that, how do you address the parking need? And so,
Park at LA Fitness.
yeah, I mean, I think there's a way to figure it out, uh, and then, student yield, like, to the school is there s if and I don't know what if the yield from a high rise is different than the student yield from a single family,
Right.
uh,
That
detached.
right.
It might be a stronger student yield from single family detached than there might be on a high rise.
Right, and also there's only a limited amount of students. I think Kaplan did a development in Towson. I'm saying how at some point,
Yeah.
there's only so many units to go around in a sense.
So I think that's and in other parts of the county, I think that's what you'll see because I know there's a lot of demand amongst people that own office buildings that aren't doing so well that would like to convert it to residential. And so sometimes that can get really complicated because, sewage load, as I talked about before, parking, traffic, it's different. For an office building, you might have a lot of traffic in the morning, and then when uh, the workday is complete, you have a lot of traffic leaving the office space. But residential, it's different patterns.
Right, and Pennsylvania's right by the mall, so already it's very jammed over there.
Yeah. So I think we can figure it out, but it's going to take some. We'll have to roll up our sleeves, I'm an urban planner, but that's my training, so I think planners can figure this out, and I think, I think it's really important for planners, developers, and community to work together to try to figure this out and solve, some of the issues related to conversion of, office to residential.
Right, and that's another opportunity for a developer,
Yeah.
right? If they're not looking to necessarily start from scratch and they're looking to use a office building that fits with the windows and the way the foundations and all the problems that go
Well,
along with.
sometimes, and you may know this better than I, starting from scratch is more economical than trying to retrofit something.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Because sometimes the way the windows are or the way the plumbing and electric, all these things, like you said, it's made for office. It's not
Right.
made for, plumbing, all that. It's gonna have a big effect. Thank you so much. Is there anything else before I know it feels like 10 minutes, but it's probably been what, like,
No, it's gone quick. It's been
go
fun.
yeah, it's gone like it's probably been an hour, honestly.
Yeah.
You didn't even know it. But anything, I guess, at the end of it, I always open the floor for anything you wanna mention or ask or anything that on your mind.
We covered a lot of ground, but I guess to me, I think one thing that's really important for the communities to stay engaged, keep focusing on things that are important to you. Um, you can always feel free to reach out to my office. Our office number is 410-887-3385 or council2 at Baltimore County MD.gov. So it's COUNCIL, the number two, at Baltimore County, spell it out, MD.gov. And like I said earlier in our discussion, our constituent services are unmatched. And let me also give a shout out to I have an outstanding team. My chief of staff is Justin Silverman. Carlos Gonzalez, sometimes we call him Chaim, is our special projects manager. And then Zena Moore and Taylor are our legislative aides.
Thank you so much. Thank you, and thank you to everyone on your team doing an amazing job. I really appreciate you having you here. I think for me, one of the main things is having positivity being shared because every time I open the news these days, it's negative, 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 and that's why I love talking to people like yourself to see let's okay, there's negative out there, but what's positive that we could take on. So I really do appreciate you coming
Thank you for inviting me, Yankee. It's great to speak with you.
for sure from Yankee to the Orioles. Yeah,
So.
thank you very much.